Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 222. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have with us the internationally acclaimed founder of Dismay Comics and the host of the Store Brand Comics podcast, Brandon Ingram.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And yeah, like I guess technically you can now say internationally acclaimed because some of my past couple Kickstarters, like from a year ago, it's like, oh, person got it from Switzerland, person got it from Australia, person got it from the UK. It's like it's spread. I was like, so technically I'm an international comic maker. Like comic seller, basically.
Yeah, well, and I gotta say that, Brandon, thank you for coming on. I read the Dismay comic, and I gotta say, I read that, and it reminded me a lot of, I think I talked about it was like a David Lynchian feel of that movie theater horror one, where you get left off thinking, what the heck is going on here? But you didn't want to know the answer because it was almost like you were afraid to figure out what actually was going on. So it's being confused was better than actually you answering the question of what that horror was going on. And
that's a big thing is like, obviously with the main character there, like a lot of stuff is going on, like psychological horror and stuff, but especially how the page layouts are. Like it starts off like first few pages are like 1, 2, 3, like standard panel layout basically. And then as it progresses, panel layouts are just not all over the place, but there is a difference as it progresses to where you, the reader, it's like, oh crap, like I feel like I'm going through all the stuff that Ben's going through.
Right. Now, how did you come up with that idea? Like, so because you as you write comics, that were you very specific in the artist to let them know that you wanted to have that set up like that? Or is that kind of a creative process that you did with the artist for that?
Well, when it came to how it was structured in terms of like starting in the beginning, the pages will be more regularly structured, even though like the artwork is like beautiful and like atmospheric and stuff like that. It's still kind of regular structured panels. From there, I basically said, like, as it progresses, like there's a script, but I also said as it progresses, the page and panels need to get a little bit crazier. But like when it came to how crazy it got, Jade Sky, the artist, was the one that was able to construct that very well. So it's that collaboration between writer and editor and the artist. And yeah, it was awesome.
And it had kind of a painter. It had kind of like a painting feel to it as well.
Yeah.
On that, you have a Kickstarter that actually is live as of this recording. That actually you can buy issues 1 and 2 of Dismay. So Brandon, I want to go into the Kickstarter. I want to talk to you about the Kickstarter. But first, for those that might be unfamiliar with Dismay Comics and the work that you've done, Brandon, do you want to give people a little bit of background on how you got into writing comics?
Yeah. So pretty much I got into first writing screenplays like fresh out of high school. Like right when I got out of high school, I was like, I had a love for film and stuff like that before. And I grew up on reading and loving comics and storytelling. Like since I was like 7 or 8, I had been reading comics. And then once early high school started, I was reading like serial runs. Like I picked up on Scott Snyder's New 52 Batman run, was like consistently reading that and different stuff like that. But when it came to me writing, it was around after high school where I was writing film scripts, doing a lot of research on how to write film scripts and different things like that. And I was entering into contests and I was getting some feedback. I won like a couple small contests here and there. But eventually I was like, man, like, because at the time I'm still like reading comics. Like I'm still blazing through a bunch of comics. I was like, man, I really want to do something with some of these stories. And I know a lot of the stories would cost a low budget. That's like Hollywood low budget. Like, like The Gallows Man. Like that was a feature length script at one point. I was like, I could make that under $500,000. In Hollywood terms, it's like, wow, that's very low. For Brandon terms, it's like, that's a crap ton of money that I'll never see. So, so it's kind of like all of these stories I can make into comics. And since then, a lot of stories have just been like, I'm just making this as a comic, because it started out as like, I want to make these a comic so I can see these things come into fruition. But as I was starting that, I was like, oh, well, I just want to start writing for comics. Like if it becomes like a film or TV show or whatever, like great. Like everyone wants that, but like that's not the reason I'm doing it. So yeah, I basically converted the scripts, redid them some, and then made them work for comic book form, and just went and started looking for artists online. Like DeviantArt was one of the first places I found a lot of the artists I worked with, and then a few other artists through like Instagram and stuff like that. But that's really where it started, was pretty much early 2019. Just a few things happened to where it kind of like kickstarted me of being like, yeah. So I've been writing comics. Now I want to actually make them with artists. And so I've kind of been doing this since basically March or April of 2019.
Now, talk to us a bit about that, how, because when you put together these anthology stories of that we have for Dismay Comics, you mentioned how you find your artists. What else would you recommend for comic book writers that might be looking for artists when it comes to from the business side of things? Do you recommend contracts or any of that stuff as well?
Yeah, so when it comes to looking for an artist, the first thing I'll say is, don't be one of those people that's like, oh, you'll get paid in exposure. Don't be one of those people. No one likes those people. Don't be one of those people. Even if like you might be working on a budget, still pay your artist. You can find artists on a low budget. You just need to work with that. Work with the skill level that you're paying for and stuff. But yeah, I found artists through DeviantArt. I found some through Instagram. You can also, an easy way nowadays that I didn't know back then was Facebook groups. There's like writers seeking artists or artists seeking writers, that sort of stuff. So those are some easy ways. And then, yeah, work for hire contracts. I would say I'd recommend 99.9% of the time, it'll never like come up in the future or you'll never need it. But in that 0.1% that you do need it in the future, you have it there. You have proof that, hey, we had a contract, I paid. And that's an important thing, is when hiring an artist, most artists will do like payment per page. Like they have a page rate. So like each page you're paying per page. And with most artists, this isn't all, but with most artists, they'll do like you'll pay them for one page, then they'll do the page, pay for one page, then do next page, that sort of structure. I like that personally. There's other ways where it's like you pay half of the total up front, and then when it's finished, you pay the other half of the total. That one isn't bad if make sure it is a reputable artist. Like you've heard people work with them. They work well with others. They've never like screwed over anyone in terms of like you paid half up front and they did one page and then just flaked and you never saw them again. That's something you have to be careful with. Artists, I also say the same. Make sure you're going to get paid. So writers, make sure you're not getting screwed. Artists, make sure you're not getting screwed.
Right. Now, when it comes to doing Kickstarters, because you've done 4 so far, how much of the budget do you kind of allocate for the artists?
Well, when it comes to paying for the artist, I pay out of pocket. Like, luckily, I've through my job and stuff, I've saved up over the years, and I don't really have like big purchases I like to get. Like I don't really care about cars or I live in Florida. I don't care about boats or anything like that. So like, yeah, my hobby expenditures are basically go to the movies every now and then, buy original art every now and then because I like buying original art, and then making comics. So I pay out of pocket for my artists like that I work with. And then when it comes to the Kickstarters, like you'll see it's usually low goals. The point of the Kickstarter for me, because I've already paid out of pocket for the artist, is just to print the books,
Right.
and get the books to people's hands, and also to have some extra books for like comic conventions or like future Kickstarters. Like let's say there's a Dismay Avenue #3 Kickstarter, like in the future. Uh, it's an anthology, so you can pick up any issue and read it and have a whole complete story or complete stories. But let's say they're like, yeah, I do want to read issue 3, but I also want to read issues 1 and 2. Well, it's like, okay, well, I have some extras and you can get those. So that's, for me, the point of the Kickstarter is there's an audience there with Kickstarter. People are able to get it. I'm able to print it, and I'm able to print some extras. Like that's the point of the Kickstarter for me.
Now, what is it about when you're writing? What do you enjoy most about compared to, and we'll talk about Gallows Man in a bit, but compared to your ongoing series as to the anthology, how is the writing different for each one of those as it comes to from that creative process?
Yeah, when it comes to specifically Dismay Avenue, this horror anthology, because the first 2 issues are psychological with some cosmic horror with a little bit of supernatural horror, but as issues go on, it's going to be all kinds of different horror. But when it comes to Dismay Avenue, horror is something I gravitate very easily to when it comes to writing, because I just grew up on watching a bunch of horror movies, watching horror TV shows, reading horror literature and stuff. And I, when it comes to the writing aspect, I love Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone. And that's like, to me, like perfect masterclass of like how to write anthologies. And I'll say how to write horror anthologies, because some people will be like, well, like some of the episodes are sci-fi or some of the episodes are this or that. It's like, maybe that's a main genre in that episode, but each one of those episodes, there are a ton of horror elements in it. That's the thing with horror, is it's a very broad genre. Like when your your when your grandma thinks of horror, she slashers and gore fests. That's what comes to mind with horror. But horror is so broad. And yeah, I just, it's the thing that I can write easiest. Like I love writing all genres, like not just superhero stuff, not just horror stuff, but horror is the thing that comes kind of the easiest for me in terms of how quickly I can write it. And this is biased because I'm the writer, but make a good script quicker than another genre.
Right. Now, what were, as you mentioned, the Twilight Zone? What are some of the comic book horror ones that have inspired you?
Yeah, so some comics, like comic horrors that have inspired me. Scott Snyder's Witches, that was a one a few years ago that was very critical when it came to like horror in the woods or horror in a small town, like a small, I don't think it's Southern, but I grew up in the South, and the town that he depicts feels like a Southern town I grew up in, basically, with woods all around and stuff. So Witches is up there. Recently, I haven't read a ton of issues, but like the Silver Coin has been pretty good. I like the element of each issue following this coin as it's getting passed along and that sort of stuff. Those are major influences. And then something that it's a small part of a story in issue 2 of Dismay Avenue. Ice Cream Man, the horror anthology that came out a few years ago. It's still going. Um, in one of the stories in issue 2 of Dismay Avenue, there's a little girl who goes to a thrift shop. She finds a mystical triangle in the thrift shop like a musical triangle. When she hits it, she gets sent into other dimensions each time she strikes it. And she strikes it one time and she gets sent to like this concrete area just surrounded by woods, and like an ice cream person pedaling on a ice cream bike like pedals up to him. And that was part of that was influenced by me reading Ice Cream Man at the time, because I was like, already I thought Ice Cream Men were weird because there's a movie in like the 90s. It was a horror movie. I think it was just called Ice Cream Man. And already I had some creepy vibes with it. And then when I read that comic, I was like, okay, it's settled. Ice Cream Men are creepy. This is going to be a creepy element within this horror story right here. So yeah, there's a lot of influences all over the place with horror comics and horror media.
Right. And so how is it now talk to us a little bit about also with Gallows Man. It also, as we mentioned before we went live, that it does have a bit of a campy Batman feel to it with a touch of Quentin Tarantino. And where did you come up with that story, Gallows Man?
So really, like the first thing that popped in my head was that like initial thematic line basically was like,
right,
what if, like, I had never seen any of the Batman 66 stuff before, the Adam West stuff before writing it. All I'd seen were like the memes, like Batman running around with the bomb over his head, stuff like that, and like the G Willikers Batman, like stuff like that. And it was kind of like, what I did know about the show is whenever a punch was about to happen, big boom, it's a bang, pow, whatever. You didn't see the punch connect. You saw maybe the aftermath, and the aftermath was usually like the villain's like slumped over, or they're already like tied up or handcuffed.
right.
And so the initial thought was like, what if that, but maybe you do have a bang or a pow, and then that aftermath you see is like realistic, like bloodiness, like teeth falling out, bloody nose, all this stuff, broken neck, broken back, all this stuff, impaled by an umbrella, all kinds of stuff. And so that was the initial thought. I was like, okay, I got to make a story out of this. And it was originally starting as like kind of that fun parody satire of Silver Age, but it was also like, well, there is a lot of Golden Age I can kind of parody and satire, because I also do love, that's the thing, is I don't crap on Golden Age or Silver Age heroes or comics with this comic. I have a love for those. I poke fun at it a little bit, but there is still a fun love that is there. And the thing with Golden Age characters, a lot of them are just killing the bad guys willy-nilly. A lot of them have guns and all this stuff. And so, and the thing with that is, back then kids would look up to these superheroes and be like, wow, I want to be like him. Like, he's such a role model. And so I like ramped that up in the Gallows Man to where like there's, I mean, the hero's name is Gallows Man. Like, you already know, like, okay, death is coming to every criminal he comes encounter with, even like a common mugger. Like, crazy deaths are happening, and basically the world is like happily desensitized to this crazy violence, to where like everyone, like, there's a radio host. It's set in the 1940s. The main villains are like this Nazi cult that's like infiltrated the city, but there's other like villains along the way. But like there's a radio host in the 40s that is like narrating sometimes. He's like, that Gallows Man and his sidekick Newsboy, he's like the Robin equivalent, basically. Like, Gallows Man and Newsboy, they took out the dastardly Walrus and his henchman the Jackal. Oh, what a great victory. It was good to see that they got their comeuppance, that sort of stuff, and going on. And basically, like, everyone loves these heroes that are just like hanging villains and all kinds of crazy gadgets and stuff similar to Batman, all these weird gadgets that are like deadly gadgets. But yeah, just kind of, and as well, there's like kids who are like, I love Gallows Man. Like, he's the best. I look up to Gallows Man. It's just like kind of taking the desensitization of violence and ramping it up to like 10, basically. This world that Gallows Man is in.
Well, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I know like the Golden Age comics, because I love reading all those public domain Golden Age comics you can get online now, and they would have like a very specific villain that just seems, this is a great villain, and at the end of the story they kill him. So it's like, so there's no reoccurring villains really. So it's, I see that in those Golden Age pieces, that's very specific to that. Rarely do you actually see a villain escape and come back again in the late, but it seems like they just always kill them. And the Jungle comics, I was reading some of the Jungle comics, and I don't know if it's Sheena or one of them that actually has, in the beginning of one of the stories, it'll give actual names to a lion or a chimpanzee or a rhinoceros, and they'll say like so and so the lion, like an actual named lion, and they'll kill it in the first few panels. Like, and it's like, why did you name it? Like, it's
that's the thing. Weird. That's such a minor thing, but just adding the name like hits you even more, because it's like, oh, it had a name. It's almost like, even though it's an animal, it's like it's a person behind there almost. Like,
I know, man. So congratulations, as we mentioned, that you did hit your goal already on for Dismay Avenue issues 1 and 2, a psychological horror anthology. So and as it says, 4 different comic artists, 5 psychological and cosmic horror stories, and 100 plus pages of pure terror. I like that. And as of this recording, you still have 13 days to go on it. Do you want to kind of give people a little bit of background on this? Because this is what's different in this Kickstarter as compared to your previous Kickstarters that you learned from.
Yeah, so with the previous ones, Gallows Man, I love Gallows. I love all of the series I work on, but Gallows Man is sometimes hard to market, especially if I approach someone and I'm like, hey, like, you want to check this out, maybe do a review or have me on or whatever, and they're like, sure, send me the first few pages or whatever, and we'll go from there. And I'll be like, maybe I should send the whole comic, maybe you should see the whole issue, because if you read the first few pages of Gallows Man, you're like, oh, this seems like goofy or whatever, or you see like someone with a swastika patch on them, and you're like, oh, like, I gotta stay away from that. It's like, no, those are the bad guys. They're getting their comeuppance. They're not the good guys. But it's one of those things. So specifically when it comes to marketing and stuff like that, I love the Gallows Man, but it's a little bit harder to market than a horror book. Horror is very popular. That's not the reason I like made a horror comic. I just love horror. And luckily, horror is a popular thing right now. But yeah, like a big thing that has kind of set this apart is me working with multiple artists and like very different artists, very different art styles. Because like each story is extremely different. Like issue 2 has 4 different stories. It's over 60 pages long. You have one story, Tolls the Bells, which is very much manga influence, like the story as well as the art, because it's very influenced by Junji Ito. He's a horror manga guy. Both the story and the art feel like a Junji Ito type thing, and I've had a lot of people be like, man, I'm getting hard Junji Ito vibes from this. I'm like, thank you. Like that is a compliment to compare it to Junji Ito. For those wondering about the story, I'm gushing over the art. The story follows a little boy who has to stay after school one day because he gets in trouble. And when he stays after school, creepy stuff starts happening. Like teachers are gone, and a huge portion of the horror with this is like the horror of isolation and darkness, because it is like basically like a 9-year-old boy. So just ramp up the horror of isolation and darkness, because you're even more terrified of those things in your younger years. So that's kind of where that one is, without spoiling too much about the story. And then Raw Horror, the art done by Jade Sky. I also will give like a brief little synopsis of it to not spoil anything. Basically, it's about a military soldier who wakes up at his house, but it feels very unfamiliar. It feels like a very unfamiliar surrounding for him. And this one is very similar to Program, but a little bit different. Very atmospheric, very surreal, paintery artwork. But it's even more surreal and creepy. Like there's stuff that like you read it once and then you'll have to go back and there's stuff in the background. Like that page, like the pictures, like the first picture, the couple's looking at each other. The second picture, they're looking at you. They're looking toward you. It's various stuff like that. Yeah. And then the third story in this one, Destination, it's more your modern contemporary artwork, but with great lighting. Federico does that well. Follows a little girl and her mom go into a thrift shop, and the little girl wanders off. I talked about this before. She finds a musical triangle, and when she strikes it, she gets sent into other dimensions. And that's an example of this one dimension with these crazy monsters in it. Very, very terrifying and crazy monsters. And yeah, I won't I'll try not to spoil that one too much, but it's a trip. And then the last story with issue 2 is Acolyte, which is, it's done by Helen Bolton. She does the artwork, and she does the artwork for Gallows Man. But this is very different artwork than Gallows Man. She's very like, she can go in multiple directions with her art style. This is very much like Dr. Seuss type art style, because it's starting out, it feels like a Dr. Seuss story. The main character, his name is Mr. Hinklehorn. That's like a Dr. Seuss name, basically. And Mr. Hinklehorn's going about his daily life, and he's just taking crap from everyone, like from work, at the store, in traffic, all this stuff. But all while this is happening, he just keeps a big smile on his face and says, "Thank you, sir," or "Have a nice day." And it's like, something's up with Mr. Hinklehorn. And as the story progresses, it's like, okay, I see now. And then, yes, this is a Program, which Jade Sky did the artwork on. And it follows a couple, Ben and Mia, who go on a movie date night to a movie theater on the outskirts of town. And huge Cineplex, but it's like dead. Like there's no one in the parking lot, no cars in the parking lot. There's 2 concessions workers in the theater, and then some guy off in the distance in the lobby with his hoodie pulled over. Very creepy, very weird. And as it progresses, it just spirals down, this creepy psychological horror. But yeah, like this one, Program in particular, the first third of it is pretty much all true. It was a date I went on with a girl back in college. We went on a date to a movie theater outskirts of town, and no one was there. And basically the first 15, 16 pages is nearly identical to how it played out. Some of our conversations were a little bit different, but it's basically how it played out. And the story is basically like a, what if it went this crazy, creepy direction?
So in real life, there was some weirdo with, like, not a weirdo, but somebody in a hoodie.
There was someone in the lobby, just like off in the corner, and his back was like kind of turned, like in the corner of the lobby.
What was the movie? Do you remember?
That's the thing, is I put in all of these comics like at the very end, like behind the panel or behind the scenes, like me commentating basically on the stories and stuff, and my mindset of writing them. And I was trying to remember when writing this. I was like, what movie did we go see? And I looked through and I looked through. I was like, I don't even remember what movie we saw. Like that's the thing is one day I'm going to see a poster of the movie or someone's going to say the movie name. I'm going to be like, holy crap, that's the movie we saw. But to this day, I can't remember what we saw because we were just, this was like our second date. So like part of it was like me focusing on like trying not to be weird or nervous around her. And then whenever the projector is like frozen and it's playing a loop and all this stuff, like those are the two biggest things I remember about that day.
Right. So talk to us a bit about, you have your reward tiers. You have them split up into, this is interesting, a level 1, level 2, and level 3 and level 4.
Yeah, so reward tiers 2 and up, you get access to the stretch goals that we hit. But there's a reward tier for literally any budget from $1 to $60. At $5, you can get issue 1, which is over 40 pages of comics, that big 40-page comic program, and then a 1-page like comedy horror backup, to where like after you read program, to alleviate some of that tension, you can read alternate reality, which is basically 5-panel comic of, hey, switch trees and humans. Like what if trees were sentient and humans were like trees and they were planted in the ground and that sort of stuff. It's a fun, stupid comic. I like it. But so yeah, $5 you can get that digitally. For $9 you can get both issues 1 and 2 digitally. And that's over 100 pages of comics. So just $9 there. Then physical copies, they start at $11. Go from there. And then there's like, as it goes up, there's huge bundles to where it's like huge, like bang for your bucks as it goes up. And there's also an exclusive T-shirt with this T-shirt. I absolutely love it. Like, I'm going to get me one. My sister was like, hey, get me one. I'm like, all right, fine. I'll get you one. It'll be part of your Christmas present or whatever. But yeah, I absolutely love this T-shirt. It's a pull from Tolls the Bells from issue 2. But yeah, so with the T-shirt, you can get your creepy horror comics and you can add on the T-shirt. Or, and this is going to be weird, if you don't like comics, if you happen to not like comics though, you can get the T-shirt separately. You can just get the T-shirt. And there's also variant covers that you can get. And yeah, like as it goes along to the point where there's retailer bundles. We've already had a couple comic shops do the retailer bundles.
Nice.
And then there's the creator bundle, creator value bundle, where you get everything, like the both comic sign, both variant sign, all the stickers, all the PDFs, all that stuff. And you also get the scripts digitally. So you can look at the scripts and be like, hey, like I can pull some, like I can learn from this guy's writing. Or you can look at it and learn like, hey, like he sucks at writing. I don't want to be like him, or whatever it may be. As well as you get a Zoom consultation with me, a 2-hour Zoom script consultation where before the consultation, I'll read through your script, do notes and stuff. That way, when we're in that 2-hour script consultation, a lot of that time is giving feedback and me asking questions or you asking questions and going from there. But a lot of great tiers with this.
I see that, like so that's for $60. That's an amazing deal that you get everything. You get the complete bundle, which is both issues 1 and 2, like you said, is over 100 pages, scripts of all the stories, and plus, as you say, a 2-hour script consultation through Zoom. So that's amazing. Yeah. And so stretch goals, you have some stretch goals unlocked already too.
Yeah, we hit the 751 within like a day. We hit the 500 initial goal within the first 7 hours. And then we hit 750 within the first day or two. And yeah, so that one's it's a bookmark, Dismay Avenue #2 bookmark. And it's basically this horrifying, creepy eye darkness bookmark. to where if you're in the library, you have that in your book, people are going to be doing some glances because they're like, what the heck? Like someone's staring at me or something. It's double-sided. And then there's a Dismay Avenue sticker. We hit that, the 1250 sticker. So all
Nice.
physical backers will also get that. And then what we're working toward now is our $2,000 stretch goal, which is and I like all of these stretch goals. I really like this one. It's basically a Gallows Man Dismay Avenue crossover.
Now, I'm also curious, is like, as you being the writer for all of these stories, is there any story that you wrote that you say, I want to come back to this world here? This one, there's more creepy stuff going on. Have you have like any scripts that people would recognize and revisit one of those specific settings?
Like I'm in like a film group, but they're up in like Des Moines and I'm down in Florida. But when you're a writer, you don't have to be there. So you can just write it and just send it. So that's the good thing about writing. If I was an actor, it's like, I'm out of luck there. But
Right.
there was a film contest, like a 48-hour film contest a month ago. It was like a horror one, and it dealt with a movie theater. And I basically made it. And then after I wrote that, I was like, oh crap, because a lot of people really like Program. Like the people that have read it, they really like Program. And I've had a couple people be like, man, like I would like to see you one day go back to this world, or see some more stuff dealing with the theater or whatever. And after hearing all that and after writing that theater script, I looked at the theater script, worked on it a little bit. I was like, this could fit in this world.
Oh,
So
cool.
in a future Disney Avenue, there will be a story dealing with that theater.
Wow. Okay. Because there is something about that place, like especially, um, some of the other characters that they interact with. You say there's something about this. It's just something weird going on here. Yeah. So before we wrap up, I want to talk to a little bit. I want our audiences and listeners to learn more about your Store Brand Comics podcast.
Yeah, so this is a podcast I do with a buddy of mine, Tio, and how the best way to describe it is half the time we are doing pitches. Like
Mm.
we are doing pitches for like comic crossovers or movie crossovers or property crossovers. Like the most recent thing we did was uh, crossing over James Bond 007 with Fate Stay Night, which is an anime.
Huh.
That was and what that was like the crossover chicken ones. We started doing those recently. Is me and Tio will not talk about this until we are on the podcast, and we have both picked a franchise, basically a franchise of any sort, any media. And mine I picked was James Bond 007. I didn't tell him until we were like, okay, go say it as we're on the
Mm.
podcast. I said 007, he said Fate Stay Night. And then for the next 2 hours, we're just pitching and making this story. So that's like half of it. That's half of the podcast. We also do like Marvel stuff. Like you see, like Marvel Year 3. We have like our own, we basically, the Marvel thing is like, what if Marvel Comics did a reboot? Like they did like
Mm.
a new 52, basically.
Right.
And that's basically what it is, to where we're up to year 3 right now of that reboot and a bunch of different series and stuff. We also have like a DC, like what if DCEU turned out good? What if we were in charge or whatever? And we're up to like 13 or 14 movies with that by now with the pitches and stuff. And then sometimes we have random stuff like in the past we had like uh, uh, Dog Welder and Batman. Dog Welder is a little known DC character. It's like they
Yeah,
crossed
I heard
over.
about Dog Welder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a
Yeah.
crossover with them. So we'll have little stuff like that. So that's half of the episodes, basically. Just crazy pitches and crossovers and stuff. Like we had Predator on the Planet of the Apes. We had Predator
Mm.
on Planet of the Apes, that sort of stuff. And then the other half the time, we're talking about all kinds of geeky stuff, philosophizing about geeky stuff, philosophizing about Batman, philosophizing about poop, philosophizing about Batman's poop. It's all kinds of stuff. But it's a fun time. We mostly do it as like a hobby. Like we love doing it, but we are happy to see that people do enjoy it. I will say for any new people, if you're trying to get into it, the average episode is like 2.5 hours long.
They're big. They
I
are
want to
long.
mention
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that is the average length of an episode. So I just want to warn you there.
And people can go to through Anchor FM is where that link is, and that link is also, I noticed too, is on your link tree as well.
Yeah. So you can find it on my link tree, and also most podcast listening apps you can find Store Brand Comics.
Right. Excellent. Well, I got to say though, Brandon, congratulations again on having a successful Kickstarter, and you're getting close to reaching that last stretch goal. So that's exciting. So you only got about $350 left to meet that third stretch goal.
And if we win, I shouldn't say if, because I know we are going to hit it. When we hit that, I'll reveal the fourth stretch goal, which will likely be the last one. That'll be a $3,000 stretch goal, but I'll reveal that once we hit the 2,000 one.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Fun. So Brandon, what's next for Dismay Comics?
So pretty much the next thing after Dismay Avenue 1 and 2 will be Gallows Man number 3. It's a 4-issue miniseries. Each issue is like 48 pages long, sometimes a little bit more. So each issue is like double size pages. So issue 3 will come out the first half of 2023. I'm not going to say specifically. Likely it'll be May of 2023 because that's how each one of these have been. It's usually been May 4th. Like one year it was like May 4th, and it's like that's Star Wars Day. It's like sure, it'll also be Gallows Man Day. So yeah, Gallows Man number 3 will come out first half of 2023. Dismay Avenue number 3 will likely come out around the same time next year. So October, September time of 2023. And I hope to sometime in the middle or after those have maybe a one-shot here or there. Like there's a horror one-shot that I'm working on that I don't think will really work in Dismay Avenue. It'll just be its own thing. So I'm working on that. And then there's also some other series. Like there's a 12-issue series that I'm working on that's like a horror war story that I'm really liking, but I have it all mapped out. But in terms of scripts, issue 1's completely done. The script's completely done for that. Issue 2, I know how it's going to play out. I have an outline for that. I just got to get on that and write that. And then I have a whole notepad of ideas and stuff. And there's always like stuff I go back to where it's like, oh, like I wrote a whole issue for this series. Like I looked at this a month ago. I was like, oh, there's a serious superhero story that I've been writing that I just realized a year ago, like looking at it now, I realized a year ago I wrote a whole first issue of. I was like, I need to get back to that. So there's stuff I go back to here and there.
Right. Well, listen, so Brandon, you got to come back on when you're ready to talk about Gallows Man 3 and then also Dismay Avenue issue 3 as well. So yeah, cool. It's great talking to you. And like I said, congratulations again on hitting your goal.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
And so to make this episode more evergreen, if somebody's listening to this a year from now where can they find your comic books if they want to read them?
So if you're listening to this in the future after this Kickstarter, I don't have an online store. I don't plan on getting an online store anytime soon, but with all my comics, they're going to be available on each Kickstarter that happens. So Gallows Man number 3, when that happens, you'll be able to pick up issues 1 and 2 of Gallows Man through that. And also in the add-on section, I'll have Dismay Avenue 1 and 2. So each time a Kickstarter rolls around, you have a chance to pick up these other books as well.
Perfect. Okay. So you got to grab it. So for those that are interested, in the show notes, I'm going to have a link to this Kickstarter we're talking about now. Through there, you can probably click on that hyperlink and it'll probably have an update on there for any of the newer Kickstarters that would be happening in the future of this recording. So perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so what's next for you, Brandon? What can your readers expect from? What can your readers I'm going to edit this part out. I just stumbled over my words. Oh man, I tell you, I was knocking it out of the park for so long. Usually, I just so you know, I have timestamps on all my interviews. I always have like timestamping this and that and this and that, and then it looks smooth later. But this is only my 14, 46, 40. There you go.